first time for everything. Hi, everyone, especially to those who will be watching this, watching the recording. Oh, good, some people are joining. So almost all of us who will be doing this panel, this will be our first time. Second time for me joining Instagram Live, but that's amazing. Hi, everyone. But yeah, it's all of us are relative Instagram novices, so this will be fun. This will be enjoyable on many levels. Okay, good. So let's see. If you guys can join, I think it's request to join for the panelists. Good stuff. If you guys can hold with us for 3 seconds. Namaskar, Vaisakh.
Namaskaram, akka.
Okay.
This is not Clubhouse.
I know. Not easy, is it? Well, people are slowly joining. Of course, I'm having like computer issues at the same time. Yeah, we can set some of the kind of, I guess, easy directives and actually even introduce people. Vaisakh, do you mind even just giving like a quick introduction?
Oh, like about today's topic or like just about myself?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think a bit about myself. I think many of your audience might not know who I am, so I'll just take a few seconds to just tell who I am. So I think since today's topic is about mental health and all, I'm someone from a young age who suffered from depression. I was diagnosed with, anxiety, OCD, and I was given psychiatric pills. And unfortunately, they did not work for me. So I had to taper them off with the help of using therapy and other methods. But still, I always used to have recurrences of depression and anxiety, whenever things would go bad. So I was always in the search of something that would really work for me. And that's how I found the yogic practices to be very, very effective. And when you find something very effective, I tend to hold on to that. But even though I tend to hold on to that, I still would see that sometimes these things would come back. So the question would always arise, are the yogic practices working or do I need to find something else? Mm-hmm. So this has been something that has been, always been there with me, but I still somehow tend to stick on to the practices because there is something deep within me which tells that this is what I need to hold on to. But at the same time, I also know that I need other things to support me when these kind of things happen. So I think we are basically here to discuss about that and to share each of our experiences and the resources maybe I use and the awesome panel that you have chosen would like to discuss, because I'm here to listen to them also, because as a person I have very few tools with me that I use during such instances, and I have a community who I interact very often on the direct messages, on the comments, and on a personal level I interact with them rather than just putting out media. And I tend to notice that a lot of us go through the same things, even though we are very regular with the practices. A lot of things, whether it's mental health or just stress, still tend to keep on happening. So what are the things that we can use during these times to, to just push through that phase? So I think that is why I'm here, to just listen to all the awesome panel and maybe add a few little bit things that I use personally.
I think this might be possible. I tried to bring Stephanie in at the same time. Again, technical difficulties, so give me 1 second. We're adding... Oh, yeah, fantastic.
Do you need me to go out so that someone... Okay.
Oh, no, we got it. Hi, Weam. How are you?
Hello. Hello, everyone. Good.
Thank you for joining me. So while I bring up or attempt to bring up the others who are even less Instagram savvy than I am, do you mind giving a quick introduction and, yeah, introducing yourself to the group?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, thank you for having me. So my name is Weam. I'm currently situated in Canada, but also an isha meditator. It went in line with my own spiritual seeking and my own, path. And so since then, I've been starting, actually, a lot of my clients do meditate. Not all of them are from isha. Some of them are. And are using to complement sadhana. Are you?
Oh no, Mark Zuckerberg. We lost Weam, akka. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, Stephanie keeps texting me. Oh, Weam, I think, is she frozen for you too, Vaisakh?
I think we lost her totally. We lost her.
Yeah.
We lost a good soldier.
All right.
Come back.
Okay, meantime, we'll see if Steph can join and Zer as well. I think she might be here.
They're asking, will you be recording this so that they can watch it later?
Absolutely recording. Yes, absolutely. And it'll be posted, I think, on my account and your account. And did you say YouTube or podcast?
Yes, I'll do that too. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
give them instructions.
Okay, I just have to use my this phone and not the other.
It's okay, Stephanie. Thanks for joining. Zer, it's okay. We'll add you in a minute. No worries. So, Stephanie, while we're getting settled, if you don't mind giving people a quick introduction.
Sure. So my name is Stephanie Alexander. I am a fourth-year psychiatry resident at Vanderbilt University Medical Center in Nashville. So I've been training to be a psychiatrist for 4 years and almost done. I've also been an isha meditator since 2016 and have done most of the programs at this point. So I have that kind of dual experience. And I've also similarly been someone who struggled with some mental health struggles in my life. So I'm happy to talk from all three of those hats.
Yeah, same. Thank you for being here. That's exciting. Congratulations on almost completing the psychiatry. Can't be easy. I can't imagine.
Yes. At least this year is a lot easier.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Sorry I cut off earlier, guys, but what I was continuing to say was that I found that meditators actually really do need support, and they do need that complementary sometimes, because personally, for what I realized and what I experienced was even in my therapy training and doing sadhana, a lot started coming up for me, because there's like a new dimension, a new like vulnerability that's open. And so you have this safe space with your therapist or with your, with your community and with your meditators. And then you got to go out into the world that is not so compassionate, right? And I think most of us could agree to say even the people running this world, some politicians are almost traumatized children that never healed. So they end up creating this collective consciousness that you end up getting affected with. So I actually found sometimes I had to stop my sadhana because it was too much or too many things were happening, and I had to focus on one thing at a time. So yeah, and I found that approach to be beautifully synced with traditional psychotherapy, but also very, very spiritual as well. So that's what I kind of wanted to continue to add on. So yeah.
Thank you, my dear. Okay, well, some of the difficulties are a little bit sorted out. I'll see if I can add Jay in a minute, Jay Naito. But yeah, I wanted to give a brief, that document's not coming up, but I wanted to give a brief overview for the people who are joining, and then we'll dive right in. That namely, yes, we created this panel in response to a number of tragic deaths that had happened in the community, and we were having these conversations offline. But as we started to hear from people who were sharing their own personal struggles and saying that they too were suffering, we wanted to do something about it. Like, it was the time to not have private conversations and start to take it in the public realm. So I want to thank all the people who agreed to do this crazy experiment with me, and really be of service in quite a unique way. And so to give a bit of I guess a more drilled down overview, this will be, we want the conversation to be far more pragmatic and really focused on the people that need the help, who are suffering. So it won't be a theoretical discussion or, you know, an academic panel, or discussing some of the industry issues. We're really drilling down to try to be as useful and pragmatic to the people who need it than anyone else. And of course, there are experts that you can go to and, you know, watch on YouTube, even Sadhguru, who talks about, you know, mental health and the yogic sciences and how it works on a larger level. But for us, we'll be far more specific for this panel. Oh, good. Thank you, Swan.
Is that you, sir? There
Thank you, my dear. I'm having some computer issues, so I'm just going to look to that first. 1 second. But if you don't mind, welcome to Instagram Live, and then just giving a brief introduction to the people who've joined us. Can you hear me okay, Sarah?
Yeah, I can. Sorry. Hi, so my name is Zervue. I have a PhD in developmental biology. I've been a practitioner of Isha Yoga since 2016. And currently, one of the things that I really want to do is that I really want to bring mindfulness into everybody's everyday life, and just having like a small amount of mindfulness every day, hopefully using mindfulness as a tool for well-being for everybody, which is a very good cup to drink.
Okay, well, we have room for Vaisakh or Weam to join, but we'll give that a second. And yeah, so to give a little bit more background in this as well, I just wanted to share for people a few reasons why I'm really excited for this talk in particular, and then we can drill down into some of the specifics and start asking questions for the panel. The first is that on this talk, we're going to be going deep and speaking about a lot of the things that normally we speak about in private, but for many reasons, we're having this public conversation to bring awareness to various issues, and then, you know, as I spoke with some of the panelists earlier, you know, talk about some possible solutions and services and resources and guides that are available in some cases all around the world. So we know we have which is fantastic, a pretty global audience. So we will try to keep this, you know, broad in some respects, where, you know, many of the resources that we're mentioning can be helpful to anyone, regardless of, you know, finances, regardless of location, etc. Another thing is we'll be getting intimate and sharing stories, you know, struggles, more about our background that we haven't necessarily shared in a public setting, but we are hoping that this, you know, creates a bit of a safe space and you know, through vulnerability and empathy and compassion, where people can see what we have gone through to get to this point in our lives, and what we've overcome and how we did it, which is above and beyond sadhana, actually. And all of us on the panel, even some of the people that we hope to rope in a little bit later, have been practicing meditators for many years now. So yes, and then let's see, looking at my notes. Yeah, and then finally, to something I kind of touched on earlier, we'll be sharing really some of our best resources to transform your mental health, or to start that journey at the very least, for those who haven't started yet or are unsure where to go, how to begin. And yeah, we'll be talking therapeutic models, services, leading edge resources, the whole kind of a much larger spectrum. And yeah, just to touch on a little bit why we're doing this. It's something that I wrote, I think, in the description too, that youth, I know in some studies they kind of were specific to the US, but interestingly, this is now a worldwide phenomenon from the ages of 21 to 34, even 25 to 34. Historically, that has been one of the lowest groups committing suicide in the world. And I think it was in 10 years, it went from the lowest to the highest now. And if you look at that line graph, it's skyrocketing. I mean, it's unbelievable. So the need is great, even besides what we're hearing anecdotally, or what I'm hearing anecdotally, and I think what Zer and Stephanie and Weam and others on the panel know, you know, from studies, from clinical practice, etc., is that this is a real epidemic, a mental health epidemic that we have on our hands, and you know that all of us really need to do whatever we can, if possible, to get these numbers to start changing, and to, you know, raise awareness and get the resources out there. So that's a little bit of a background. Let's see, reviewing the notes, and yeah, I think even to start, something that, you know, even Stephanie, you and I were talking about earlier, but I know Zer, you're just as familiar. I think it would be good for people to, you know, get a bit of a broad spectrum understanding of what mental health struggles really are, and what they look like. Because even Stephanie, we were talking, you know, I think a few days ago that you were speaking with someone, you know, who was dealing with debilitating panic attacks, but they didn't even have the language or the understanding to identify it, or know that's what they were struggling with, or that this isn't some, you know, random crazy thing that was happening to them and they're not broken in some way. So yeah, if you could give a bit of a discussion on that.
Yeah.
So I feel like,
sorry.
Oh,
I just wanted to
Hi, Stephanie.
get Weam back up on the panel, because I feel like we would have some good insight into this too.
Yeah, you guys talk and I'll bring her up.
Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, no, so like for mental health, I feel like one of the things that you really should really look out for is like if you feel like you just can't do things anymore, right? Like everything that you used to do that made you happy, the things that like normal things that like wouldn't take you an effort to do, like if you have such an issue of doing it, one thing that's probably like a sign that you are having depression. One thing that happens to me is that like whenever I don't always have the words to describe the things that I'm going through, right? Like even if I'm going through anxiety, like I don't usually always go through that, so I don't really know how that feels like all the time. And so like Stephanie is like one of my best friends, and so I'll come and I'll ask her, like, go ask your best friends, go ask people that you trust, and be like, this is kind of how like I feel, like, do you know how? And like they will tell you, like, because like if they especially if they know how that feels, like anxiety or like panic attacks, like I don't even know how a panic attack feels like because I've never had one in my life. But then like I think it took me a while to figure out like what an anxiety attack felt like, or like what anxiety really felt like, because I've always felt it, I just never knew what it was. And I think that's one of the things that even if you can't like describe, even though you don't know what it is, you can describe like the things that you're feeling. Like I feel like I can't think about anything else. I'm focused on this issue. Like I feel like my heart rate is going up 100 miles per hour. Like those are things that you can talk to somebody about, and they can tell you like, oh, you're having a lot of anxiety. Like those are the things that like, if it's someone you trust, you can talk to.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a support system is very important, but I'm finding that, and the problem with traditional psychotherapy.
All right, Stephanie, I'll pass the mic to you, and then we'll add her maybe when the connection's a little better.
Sure. So my understanding, like the question is kind of what can mental health disorders look like, or what can mental health issues look like? And I think it's a variety of things. I can see in the comments a lot of people are mentioning. They can be anything from like a history of trauma, where, you know, someone is experiencing overt flashbacks, nightmares, reliving experiences of a traumatic event that's happened, that really impacts their entire kind of both body, nervous system, and mind. It could be something like depression, which is one of the most common things. And it's often, I think people think, oh, when you're depressed, you just feel really sad. But a lot of the feeling of depression can be of emptiness, a feeling of not having as much joy when you do things that you used to enjoy doing, a feeling of just like exhaustion or having trouble sleeping. All of these things can seem normal to some people. Oh, I'm just stressed at work. But then they go on for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, months, and that could be a sign that you're actually depressed. The anxiety, I think, is again something that's like normalized in our society, stress, anxiety. But then there's extreme levels of anxiety that actually prevent you from doing what you need to do or want to do. And those are the ones that we really think of as like pathological. And so that can look anywhere like just really like before you leave the house every day, just like feeling so anxious, thinking about all the things that could go wrong. Some people just have this general worry about everything, this feeling of uncertainty, insecurity, like nothing will feel safe. And don't even necessarily realize it's anxiety. Think it's just like being kind of wary of the world. But it's this very debilitating amount of anxiety that can lead to things like panic attacks that we were talking about. And then there's what we call serious mental illness, things like bipolar disorder, manic episodes, severe depressive disorders with suicidality, or psychotic disorders with loss of touch with reality, of things like delusions or hallucinations. And so it can look like a lot of things, to summarize, and we can obviously talk about more specifics if we want to, or if we have questions around that.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good kind of overview. Another thing I wanted to talk about and again, this is something that we kind of mentioned before, is, that these issues are really far more pervasive than we know, or even have a kind of a common knowledge of. Actually, there's another kind of wild statistic I wanted to share with everyone. And I have too many notes here, but essentially I think it said that, at least in North America, that in 4 years, the numbers went, I think it was from 1 in 4 Americans reporting, anxious or depressive episodes to 4 in 10. So that's like a fourfold increase in about 4 years. It's unbelievable, the situation we've been in the past few years with the pandemic. And once I bring in, before, I don't really want to talk too much about those contextual issues because Jay is a master at it and a bit of a poet. So we'll see if we can still bring him into the room. But yeah, for Stephanie and Zer and Weam, I did just see your message. No worries. If the connection starts, feel free to join or request to join at any moment. But yeah, Steph and Zer, I mean, I'd love to get your perspective on it because it's something that, we talked about on the outside. And we'll say particularly because the majority of people on, this panel we're kind of talking about mental health matters for meditators too, those who are practicing, how or why these issues might go hand in hand, why or how sadhana could stir up the pot for deeper sankharas, certain schemas, etc., that are happening. And then all of a sudden you're dealing with, I call it opening Pandora's box because I've seen it. I actually lived and volunteered in the Indian ashram for a year, 2018, 2019. And I saw it with myself and I saw it so many times. But anyway, I'd love for one or both of you guys to kind of address that as well.
Yeah. So maybe it's easier to talk from personal experience of with that first, because I think that's where I have the most knowledge. Obviously, I also was in India at the same time as Brigid. I was there for 4 months to volunteer and do the Samyama program. And right after that, it was just like this explosion of all of this like deep stuff and severe amounts of just like pain. It's almost like it felt like physical and mental pain. Feel like I was fully engaged. And so I think that this is a common experience among a lot of people that I met who've started doing yoga seriously and really keeping their sadhana up every day, is that I think, like Sagu says, it's like things happen on fast forward. They happen in such an intense way. The other thing that I think happens is like just being so present and mindful and like all of that with like your experiences of what's happening. You break out of this pattern of kind of like unconsciousness that we all are trying to get out of, trying to move from unconsciousness to consciousness, and all of this stuff is coming up at the same time into your consciousness and into your awareness, that has been under the surface for your whole life, and is kind of playing itself out. And so yeah, it can be, I think, a really intense experience. And while the answer may still be do sadhana, those experiences, and I think several other people have talked about it, often are really debilitating when you're trying to function in the world. And that is what I would consider a mental health disorder that is happening. That doesn't mean that more sadhana won't also eventually help make things better, but what do you do in the meantime? How do you function? How do I go and become a psychiatry resident and get through everything? And that's where I think like really working on the other sets of tools for our mental health can be really important.
Yeah, I remember a few years ago about this. One thing what was happening to me when I was doing my sadhana all the time was that my heart just started hurting. There was like pain in my heart, like all the time. And like I was literally crying over everything. And I'm not a very sensitive person, like, but like I would cry over everything. Like every little thing would just make me cry. And like sometimes I just sat in my bed and I just cried because like, I mean, I think one of the things is that like I just had to really go through those emotions. And so like I just sat and I cried. And one of the things that at the time I was a postdoc at San Francisco, and so like I have access to like getting a therapist and stuff. But and even as a student, you can get therapy through your school for free. I'm pretty sure there's usually always a counselor on that's paid that can be on campus that you can go see. Me, fortunately, I had a friend, and so I just went and saw that friend because like it was easier for me to like talk to a friend that I trusted. And so the one thing about like therapists and people who are like going to see a mental health specialist is that sometimes you don't really trust them, or like sometimes you just don't feel comfortable with them, right? And it really matters. Like you really have to like really mesh, or you really have to match up, and majority of the time you really don't. And so like I was very lucky. I had a friend, and I just went and I talked to that friend all the time, and it really helped, and it really helped my mental health. And like recently I started doing Kundalini yoga. I know like I'm not supposed to be mix and matching, but I feel like it helps me with accountability. And one of the things that I started seeing was that like I felt like I kept getting like vertigo, like whenever like I tried closing my eyes or stuff, like like the room would be spinning and stuff. But I feel like you just really just, so one thing that I do is that like I don't do it more than a once a week, and that actually keeps it at bay. Like even if you still want to do your sadhanas and you feel like too much is coming up at the same time, like I don't usually what I do is that I don't stop it all the way. Like I try to like tease it out, and I just do it like every other day, or I do it once a week. And I feel like that's enough, because like you have stuff coming up, but it's not too much at the same time.
And just for people too who are familiar with the sadhana that we're talking about, I mean, it's balancing sadhana is really good in those situations. And the great thing is we're talking about it and normalizing it and saying, actually, this can be very common, that it's affecting your mental, physical health. And so one is for those who've done, inner engineering, Sukha Kriya, or Nadi Shuddhi, for those who are, and these are free, easy practices that you can get online, anywhere. Nadi Shuddhi, and then the second being Om chanting. Again, if you've done inner engineering, I think we call it, Vaisakh, do you remember? Is it like Yoga for Peace? Where Sadhguru does
Yeah, I
Yoga.
think so. It's there in the
Yeah.
Sadhguru app for free, I think.
It is, yeah, they're all there or on YouTube, but you'll, get a similar effect, but both of those are really good, especially for the things that the Kriyas can stir up. I mean, as Zer was talking about many things, depending on the foundation you have and depending on where you're coming from. Vaisakh, is there anything that you wanted to share too on this?
Yeah, like, I'll be very honest, like, for the past 2 weeks, it's my marriage in a month. So for the past 2 weeks, there's a lot of things that is popping up. So this undue expectation that I need to be happy, I need to do things, it's kind of like an added pressure on me. So I am doing the kriyas, these things are popping up. So there's always a conflict within me, like, how do I manage all these things? Like, I'll be very honest, especially Brigid, when you said I need to come on the panel, that also triggered a bit of anxiety. Oh, I need to be on a panel, I need to put things out. I'm supposed to talk on mental health, but if I myself am struggling, how do I help people? But I realized just me being honest about my stuff might add some value. That's why I said, let me do this, and whatever little I can do, that is enough. So, like, especially what helped me along with the sadhana is, like you said, the Sukha Kriya and arm chanting. There's one more practice that I definitely hold on to. It's a free practice, but I personally find it very effective for myself. It's the Chit Shakti meditation for peace, because it's a guided meditation and I don't need to force myself to sit and do something. There is something that is guided. So it helps me a lot in, grounding myself and getting back to that, just understanding that I don't need to do a lot of things. I just need to do what matters to me. At the same time, I think it is very essential for me to find a community, or to find that one person, like you were saying, with whom I can share everything, who would not say to me like, okay, just do your sadhana, this is all nothing, something is coming back up, just focus on your sadhana. Because I feel this, because as a person who is putting a lot about inner engineering and how it helps me, there is a little bit added thing that how will I share that inner engineering is no longer working, or I'm still facing issues. If I say that, will there be a backlash, will there be this thing? But I try to be as honest as possible. Like, whether even with, this is my podcast that I record with meditators, I tell them, like, if you're facing struggles, please tell that, because I think right now there is this narrative that we need to push the program, we need to tell it promotes it is the ultimate solution for everything. Yes, in a way it helps, but there are a lot of other things to it. Like, I especially realized it once when I was interviewing one person on camera. He was telling me, like, inner engineering has worked for me, Angamadana is the best, it is the best. But the moment I switched off the camera, he's like, I'm struggling in the ashram, I feel like running away from here. Like, is this the same for you? So that's when it hit me. Oh, okay, there is something else. At that time, I was very joyful with the practices, to be very honest. Like, every day I was just doing it. I was just going high. But when someone else told me something like this, that's when it struck me, okay, there is more to the practices. There's a lot of things that can happen with each person. And after that, I noticed after a period of time, this was again starting to happen with me also. So I think to be very honest on this journey is also equally important, to connect with people who are honest even when they're doing the practices, and to be supportive of them when they're trying new things, and not just saying, no, sadhana is the ultimate solution, you just go with it, don't take anything. I think that's what I would like to add to this topic. And that's why I'm here also, because I want to listen to what are the alternatives that I can use, or other people who can use, especially when sadhana might have to take a back seat, or maybe one have to, like, the ultimate thing is stopping your sadhana. That's, I think, the ultimate thing, like, oh, you stopped your sadhana. But I think that's okay. Like, you might have to take a break and do something for yourself, which might help you. So that's what I would like to
bring
answer.
in other modalities, other practices, other therapeutic approaches. I was just trying to ping. I don't know if they want me to say their name or not, but I was having this conversation with three isha hatha teachers, but I'm sure if I brought it up with more, among my friends at least, there aren't many who would disagree that they struggled as well, quite a bit, with these practices and on this path. And in fact, one dear friend, hatha teacher, had actually said, as a result, we were speaking after this one tragic death in particular, but in the larger community there have been others, and she said, we bear a responsibility for it. There are those of us who make our living on these practices, and so sometimes there could be an added pressure almost to have a kind of a marketing layer of, you know, sadhana is the cure-all, even if that maybe is an implicit or explicit assumption. And she said, you know, we bear like a responsibility to this, and it was just, I'll see if she can join in a minute, but it was really well put, and I hope this conversation is a part of really breaking that mythos that one sadhana was ever supposed to be a cure-all or a kind of instant cure-all. It's something that we talk about in Kriya Yoga, that Sadhguru says, and many other masters, that eventually down the line, you know, that this is the potency of, you know, this practice that is focused on, you know, your energetic system, that it has that capacity. But in the here and now, just as Stephanie was saying, like, I'm a resident, I have to be a human in this world, and I have all these things coming up, I'm really struggling. It might take, I don't know how many years or how long, if I were to only rely on this one modality, and that's really putting like all my eggs in one basket when I'm struggling to show up in my life right now. Well, Stephanie, I'll give you the mic. I don't want to you, but yeah.
Like, this brings up the conversation you and I were having on the phone earlier, like, to me, of like, inner engineering has the intention and like the tools to help some of the mind stuff, but it's meant to be a very simplified version, is my understanding. It's like to something that you can keep kind of reminding yourself, and if you really can live in inner engineering, you probably are like doing well. But a lot of us, I know I definitely do, it sounds like other people struggle to stay in that like inner engineering mindset. Like really staying there all the time just doesn't happen for a lot of people. And I think there's psychiatric and therapy tools that can really help with those same things, help with those other like aspects of things that are not just the energy level, the kriya level. And for me, those have been really important. Things like cognitive behavioral therapy, acceptance and commitment therapy are like two just like well-studied therapeutic modalities that really work on some of those other things. They work on the level of the mind, the level of the emotions, and the level of activity. That's in fact the triangle of CBT, is those three things. And those are the other kind of wheels of the car behind, besides like the energy that like the Kriya really focuses on. And so I don't see it as contrary to sadhana to use some of these other tools to help with the mind, the emotions, like your activity, because you're doing the same thing. It's just right now it's very, very difficult to just stay in that like kind of inner engineering mindset. And it's like, these are tools that can get you back into that and can make your sadhana feel better and more powerful and more stable. And so I think like it's just really important to like recognize when what you're doing is not helping you be as functional as you want to be. And maybe there's some other little tools that can be really helpful.
Yeah, I agree, Stephanie. I feel like people do feel like it's like the Kriya is like a cure-all, right? But like the energy stuff is just really fun. Like but it's a really small part of the puzzle. I feel like when I was going through a lot of stuff, and I felt like my heart was literally breaking. Like one thing, I talked to a lot of like yoga teachers, and I talked to a lot of people at the time, and like they're like, write down every emotion you feel. Like sit down and write for hours, like in a journal, like how you feel all the time. Like, because literally that's really where like you have to start. Like at the time I was kind of the same way, where I was kind of like, oh, like if I just do Shambhavi like twice a day, it's gonna solve all my problems. And like for a little bit it did, but then like I was just pushing away like the real troubles that was really bothering me. And so like when I actually like sat down and really just like kind of wrote out all my emotions and my feelings and things that I felt about what was going on, like I did more work doing that. I did more like, I grew more spiritually from doing that than just doing the Kriya alone.
Yeah, Savannah, I just saw your comment a second ago that I don't even know how far back down it was, but yes, that actually this is a part of Sadhanapada as well. or at least in the early days, years ago. I'm assuming it still is. But yeah, incredibly helpful, and definitely a tool that I would recommend. And in fact, there's journaling prompts from prominent, psychotherapists, psychiatrists, etc., online that you can look up. Besides, actually, Sadhana, there's a certain there are journaling prompts that they give as well. But yeah, all of the above are helpful. And actually, I know we're kind of answering that question before it was even asked, but there's a different level to, what we were talking about earlier too, with the Kriya Yoga and, its kind of connection or with therapeutic practices as well. And Stephanie, it's something that we spoke about earlier. It's not just, Sadhguru that's mentioned it, but many, great masters that, because Kriya has been around for centuries, but that it is an incredibly powerful practice and that it requires a certain foundation. In fact, that's why, the great masters only taught it to their most senior students, or acharyas, the Buddha as well, because of its, great intensity. And so they talk about needing a certain foundation that hatha yoga for sure can help with. It's not the only thing, but it's a necessary, prerequisite almost. But one of the things, two words actually Sadhguru mentions a number of times, that people need a certain level of, receptivity and readiness to prepare for Kriya. And so Stephanie, yeah, because we were talking about this earlier, if you can kind of, respond to that with, if therapeutic models can kind of fit into, building that foundation. And one quick thing that I want to add, I don't even know how many, like hundreds of meditators I know at this point, but I have seen with my own eyes too, especially the time at the ashram, that the Kriya practices can work dramatically differently, depending on the practitioner, depending on the person. But I really saw with my own eyes the, how that having a certain foundation and strong mental, I would say even constitution, even more than a strong physical constitution, can make a world of a difference. That some people in their Kriya practices, they're Dr. Strange in the cosmos or in the inner recesses of their mind, and then others are, struggling like almost like you're in the swamp and your thoughts are like flies and you're just trying to swat away the thoughts. I mean, I'll take Shunya as an example, to have some peace or some stillness in the mind. But again, I mean, they can just work wildly differently depending on the person. And yeah, anyway, I'll give the mic to you, Stephanie, on that one.
Yeah, I mean, I think like I can talk more towards like the evidence-based therapies that, that we use commonly, and how I think they do like create some of that readiness, some of that same state. Sorry, my phone is dying and it's not charging properly. So I will do my best to help it charge. And sorry if I disappear.
No, it's one of the themes of the night.
Yeah, I was trying to do it from my computer, but that didn't work. But for me, like personally, my favorite therapy is called acceptance and commitment therapy. It's something that maybe a lot of people haven't heard about. The entire intention of it is, in a sense, kind of like inner engineering, accepting what is present in this moment, accepting things the way they are through something called radical acceptance, which is something you train in over time. It's not something that just says, hey, accept it. It's something that like can be like, there's tools and things that help you get to that point of acceptance. And then it's about like being more mindful, being more present in the moment, being more grounded. It's about challenging those thoughts too. So those thoughts that come up that make us feel sad and depressed and all of those things, and not necessarily challenging them in the same way as cognitive behavioral therapy, in which you directly challenge those thoughts and you try to argue why they're not true with yourself, which can be really difficult for some people. In acceptance and commitment therapy, it's more about oh, there's that story again. That story of how I'm incompetent. Yeah. Like kind of making joke almost of some of the thoughts that we take so seriously. But like in a very like therapeutic way. And it's again a process that's kind of done over time. And then like I said, there's a huge mindfulness component that I think like plays well into like sadhana. And it's also about value-based living. So making committed actions towards your values and your goals. And if your goal is to improve sadhana, to do any of those things, it can be in any area of your life that these values and these actions are done. That is one of my favorite types of therapy, I think, to help with this. The other one that I mentioned, cognitive behavioral therapy, which is kind of one of these kind of core new age or new wave therapies that like
new wave, not new age people.
That came after like, you know, classic psychodynamic therapy where you just explore your childhood and all of these other kind of things. And that one really is about directly challenging those thoughts and saying, where does this, like, a little bit, where does this thought come from? And then a little bit of why this thought isn't true, kind of learning that thoughts are not true. Or working from different levels. So you can work on the level of thoughts, you could work on the level of behaviors, and kind of, again, make changes in your mind based on that.
Can I just pause real quick, Stephanie, because this is profound in such a way. When we talk about even, I'll give an example in Isha Kriya, which, by the way, for people who are new to, you know, meditation practices, etc., highly, highly recommend. It's only 12 minutes. It's free. It's online. Anyone has access to it. It is a Kriya yoga practice that you don't need to be initiated or even consecrated into. And I've seen, actually, hi from Mexico, everyone, but I've seen, we did a few sessions here, which is really my first time outside of like maybe Clubhouse, but you know, you don't really see the impact that it makes on people. And but hearing from the messages I'm getting, the emails from people who are regularly practicing Isha Kriya. Anyway, dramatic. But one of the cornerstones of this practice, right, is the I am not the body. You know, I'm not even the mind. But I feel like, you know, even in my own experiences, these, I'd say, more therapeutic models have allowed me to understand the depths of even, you know, that saying or that mantra to a whole new level and start to apply it to my life on a daily basis, and not just when I'm sitting for meditation or if I'm doing Isha Kriya or Shambhavi or any of the other dozens of practices. It changes my whole relationship with this, and I think understanding it more on an experiential level. And actually, Stephanie, the two, if you could speak more about it too. I know we'll get it. So everyone in the second half, or I shouldn't say second half at this point, where I don't even know how long it is, but towards the end of the conversation, we'll talk more. We'll give a list of some of the resources and guides and recommendations where people can take them and start to make, you know, see what modalities, see what other, you know, practices they might be interested in. But Stephanie, since we're talking about it anyway, you know, both of these, is there, you know, does it require having a certain therapist? I mean, maybe CBT is an absolute yes, or, you know, can they kind of start to engage with it through certain books, or if there's a writer or other resources that you recommend?
Yeah, I definitely have a list, and I'm happy to share it now or share it later as we're talking about resources. But the really nice thing about both of these things is there's something that you can do a lot of on your own. I think like a therapist can be really useful in helping recognize patterns that are coming up as you're talking to them, things that may be unconscious to you, that you may be able to like help you more work through certain things. But both of these are methods that respond very well to like self-work, to things like journaling, to things like looking at our own thoughts, to whatever extent we're able to do that. And that is one of the benefits, especially if it's really, you're living in a place where it's really hard to get a therapist. Versus some of the other therapies do really require that like engagement with the therapist, that presence with the therapist. like I would not recommend doing intense trauma work on your own. It can be really, I mean, it can be really, really difficult. People do it, and I've done some of it on my own, and I think like there's situations where having a therapist to really help support you through that is very beneficial. But there's still things that you can do towards that on your own. How about if you can ask someone else a question? I need to try to see if I can find another charger, or I will not be able to stay on.
Yeah, absolutely. While you're off, actually, for a minute, just to let people know who are joining, welcome for the new people. This is our panel on mental health matters for meditators too. And just so we know, we have a fantastic volunteer and very dear friend of mine, Karishma, who her story was really the impetus for this panel taking place. So for those who know her, give her all the accolades because she deserves all of them. And she's taking notes for us right now. So at the end of the talk, or whenever she's ready for it, no rush, but she'll share, we'll have a Google document that I'll share, Vaisakh, you know, all of us really on social medias or wherever you're following us, that lists many of the resources, references, you know, services, guides that we're talking about, so that, you know, people don't need to like run and grab pen and paper or, you know, a laptop or whatever to take notes. We're doing that work for you. So just so you know, there will be a place that you guys can go to learn more about it, start to engage, or check out some of these resources that we're talking about. And Zer and Vaisakh, is there anything that you guys wanted to add to on the topic that we were discussing?
Yeah, I like to talk about one person who I think was the first person on social media who actually talked about it a bit way before, you know, we thought, you know, these things were happening. There was one hatha yoga teacher, Annie Akka. I don't know whether she's online right now.
She was a minute.
Yeah, she was a minute. I think she had this bicycle yogi thing along with Ajana and the hatha yoga teacher. They would go around India teaching yoga. So she was this thing that the yoga is, means the thing that I found that something must have worked for the hatha yoga. That's why she's doing this, no? She's cycling everything. But at the same time, I admire her honesty that later she posted in her feed, like even after the hatha yoga training, it was not working for her. She was still going through a lot of trauma. And for a period of time, she actually had to stop the practices. And that was very, very inspiring for me because she was very honest. Because being a hatha yoga teacher, I'm sure she must have faced a lot of backlash. How can you say this? But still, she was honest. And I think that's very important, especially on social media. There's a need, and I feel there's a need to portray in a certain way. But I think the opposite is also true. When everything is so transparent, if you're actually being honest and genuine, that is very important. And I think that helped me with the healing also. Like right now when I'm going through this, I took a break from it. I had never done silence in the ashram. Even though I've gone through the Samyama program, I have never gone for a 3-day silence. So for people who don't know, if you want to intensify your practices, if you just want to spend time with yourself, there's something known as silence, which you can go to the ashram. They give you a schedule where you just follow your practices and you can get back with the practices. So I literally decided to do that because there was a lot of disconnect with me and the practice. I was doing all the kriyas and all the things, but it was all about I need to do this, and then I need to do my rest of the things. But a point came like neither was I doing the practices, nor was I able to do things in the world. So I was like, what the hell? What am I doing? Neither is the practices happening, nor am I able to work effective in the world. So let me just focus on the practices and see if there is something to it. So that's when I decided to do the silence, and doing the silence, I realized like suddenly the rush in my mind to get things in the world just slowed down. So I was able to more be with my breath, more focus on each of the asana I was doing, and slowly from there it started picking up a little bit. I won't say everything changed after doing the silence. No, it was the ultimate solution. No, but I was like, okay, it's okay, Vaisakh, you can, that's okay, you can do things. The next step I felt was going for the correction practices, like maybe just going to hatha yoga class again and again, because learning it once I realized is not one thing. Because during the COVID time, it just struck me like, even though I was doing the practice, it was so hard. But at that time, one akka, Kanika akka, hatha yoga teacher was doing a Surya Kriya, just a simple Surya Kriya class. But just being in a presence and doing the practice was a whole lot different. Just the way the hand, you keep it a little more straighter, you bend your head a little bit more. And I realized how powerful it is. Like maybe I've been doing the practice for 2 years continuously, Surya Kriya, but the 1 3-day session with her, I realized I was doing it totally wrong. So it's a very confusing thing, like to understand whether the kriya is working or not, or is it because I'm doing it wrongly. So it becomes a lot, it's very hard to figure it out, but it is something that I had to do it and figure it out for myself. So that is what something that I would like to add to the audience. There are a lot of resources, but try to connect with me, Brigid, akka, or whoever us, and we'll all try to help in whichever way. I think that is what at the end of the day we want this panel to be, right? So, but that effort especially has to be there, I think. So, yeah.
Yeah, there was someone in the comments that was saying that when she had a lot of issues that came up when she was doing sadhana, she would talk to people and they would tell her to just keep doing her sadhana. And like now she's saying that something about her left eye can't open anymore due to the sadhana and stuff. And I'm so sorry that that happened to you. Like, I totally agree with you. Like, if the sadhana's not working for you, like just quit doing the sadhana. Like, one of the things that was happening to me was that like, it wasn't that like the sauna wasn't working for me. I just knew that like I had to do something else. Like the sauna alone wasn't enough. And so that's why like I did the journaling, like I did something else. I did everything else that I could possibly do. The things that like that you kind of know that you should be doing, but then you don't want to do it because you bring up all these things that you don't want to talk about or you don't want to think about, right? And so like all those things, like I just sat down and I went through it and like they all came out and I had to stop doing the sadhanas, like, and it was kind of convenient because at the time like I got pregnant and so like I couldn't really fast anymore, and so like it was really convenient for me and I could just be like, oh, like I was pregnant, I couldn't fast anymore. But like the real reason was really because like the sadhana wasn't working for me. And then my baby is a year old now, so like it's been almost 2 years since that's happened. And so I finally like started doing my sadhanas again, and I feel like I'm in a great place. Like every time I do it I feel great. But like if the sadhana is not working for you, I totally agree, like especially like what Annie said, like it wasn't working for her so she stopped doing it. And that's exactly what I did. Like it stopped working for me and I stopped doing it and I found other avenues that was helping. And then once those things once they've helped, and now that I'm doing those things, I came back and I did my sadhana and I feel great about it. And I don't regret it one bit. Like if the sadhana doesn't work for you, like don't do it. And you can always revisit it if you want. If you don't, like don't come back and revisit. And it's horrible what people tell you, like, oh, just keep doing your sadhana, like nothing's wrong, it's all in your head. Like it's not in your head, like it really is having consequences. And so it feels horrible. Like I'm so sorry. Like that's all I can really say to you is like I'm so sorry that they did this to you. And then but I feel like that's also a problem. And like one of the things that us practitioners and meditators is like one thing that we don't talk about. And I'm so happy that you have us on here, Brigid, is really to talk about this, have an open dialogue and an open talk about this, because everybody goes through it but no one talks about it.
Yeah, and a few other options too that I would add to people if there is a, well, number one, I'd recommend, you can write in, depending on what you're having issues with, there's the, the email, I think info, something easy to look up for the hatha school, if you're having difficulties with the practice or there's something, quite big coming up. They also can always speak with, one of the mas with hatha school or a swami for reference if they don't know an answer. So you can get some very good answers that way. There's also, I think, info@innerengineering.com, which can help if there's certain things happening with the kriyas. And also there are people that are, if not brahmacharis, even in the US ashram, there's some of the, shunya or BSP teachers who are amazing resources. I have known people who had all sorts of things come up as a result of the practices. And so the kind of targeted advice they gave was really key. Sometimes it was, this particular practice is not helpful for you. If you're dealing with these things or you have these things coming up, you need to stop that. And then, there's XYZ practices that are helpful and will, even Sadhguru says, these practices really need to be customized. All the yogic masters speak about that. That's one of, meant to be one of the greatest draws of having a live master. where you're learning these practices, that you can get that feedback. And I mean, that's a separate conversation, but obviously with Isha, it's very large. You know, there are 20 million plus people who've been through the program. So, you know, resources are limited, but there are avenues. There are avenues. I would just emphasize that. And even as Vaisakh said, all of us are resources in whatever way we can be. It might be very limited, but we might also be able to refer, recommend people to another place. And one thing I wanted to talk about, I actually just quickly messaged Danny that we're talking about her story, but Vaisakh, thanks for bringing it up and referencing it. And she's very public with it, so that's something that we can speak about a bit more. But actually, specifically, when she took that break, she started working very intensely with a master in the Himalayas on her mind. And she talks about this on Instagram. She talks about this in other public channels. But that was really the you know, the turning point for her. And honestly, it was the turning point for me as well. There are, I guess, different therapeutic models that I've, you know, experimented with and worked in. One of the resources that I would highly recommend to people, I mean, it depends on where you are in the journey. I think you need a certain foundation to start to engage with this. But two people who've been a phenomenal resource, one for me, Dr. Joe Dispenza, and I'll put in the resource guide that we publish after, there's one lecture in particular where he kind of goes through mostly neuroscience, behavioral science that, you know, in the past 10 or so years has come to give, you know, evidence or give proof to the extent that our mind, our thoughts are really influencing or creating our reality. And then the second resource that I would highly recommend to people, it's a writer. He passed away some decades ago, actually, but his name is Neville Goddard. Stefani's in the audience. He knows him well, but yeah, I had some friends who told me later, like, oh, this guy is the mystic of Reddit. You're just hearing about him. And I don't go on Reddit, but I guess Gen Z and millennials have found him, and you know, even though he's well passed on, his work has been resurrected to an incredible extent. And he actually was, I think, both initiated and taught by a yogi from Egypt, a mystic and yogi from Egypt. So his lineage is very interesting, and you know how he kind of came to this work. But yeah, these are some resources that particularly with Neville have been totally, you know, transforming for me. And for those who don't even know, just a bit of my story, I struggled with an autoimmune condition for many years, and you know, at the lowest, it just completely took me out. I mean, I was having organ failure. I had lost so much weight. I had lost so much hair. I was in so much pain. I had to stop working. I was just an absolute wreck at the same time that I was, you know, seeing a ton of specialists and going through God knows what treatment on, you know, Eastern and Western modalities. And it's really shocking the different treatments that I tried, and even potentially some extreme things. This lasted like over 10 years, so that I did, and really was working to change my mind, change my emotions, but you know, and as a result, really change my energy. That was the turning point for me. That just started, you know, having exponential change. Sometimes I describe it to people, yeah, Stefan, totally agree, as like Chit Shakti, but amplified, and where you can understand really how this is working, how it can, you know, change your life, change your mind, even from a science perspective. And I think, you know, for those of us who come from, you know, certain educational background or certain cultural background where this is how we are, you know, raised. I wasn't really raised with, you know, bhakti or devotion. You know, very logical, analytical mind, and, you know, kind of needing that foundation to believe or buy into, I'd say, a lot of the things that I'm taught. So actually, Stephanie, now that we have you back, we just wanted to engage you as well, if there's anything that came up with for you in this.
Yeah, you mean in terms of resources? Yeah, I mean, I was trying to think, because I think we talked about doing things on the level of like free resources for like working through mental health stuff, and then obviously it goes from that to like, you know, different kinds of paid resources. On the free resources side, there's, you know, multiple apps and websites, and again, like my background is in like psychiatry, so it comes from kind of that angle, and from like psychiatric disorders, anxiety, and other things. There is, and I'll have to figure out how to actually like paste them here. There's
you don't have to worry about it, babe. We'll put it in. Karishma's amazing.
Yeah.
She's our incredible volunteer note taker, and she'll put that in the Google Docs after it's done.
There's this website, the Center for Clinical Interventions. It's based out of Australia. They have like this series of like different kind of mental health like worksheets, things that you can work for if you know you're struggling with a certain thing. There's things like there's free CBT apps. One that I think is a good like combination of cognitive behavioral therapy and like journaling is called the CBT Thought Diary. That's like been pretty highly ranked by psychiatrists and psychologists. There's one called What's Up. It's a mental health app. For insomnia, there's something called CBT Coach that like can be really useful. Mindshift CBT is one that focuses on anxiety, and it's built by this group in Canada and has been like studied extensively, and is pretty well done. And then like from there, there's books. So like, again, I'm focusing on the therapies that I've talked about already, the CBT and acceptance and commitment therapy. Simple books that just like give you an intro to that and to like understanding what those modalities are and help you start working through things on your own. The Happiness Trap, How to Stop Struggling and Start Living by Russ Harris is an acceptance and commitment therapy book that's like very, very simple, but like really, really goes through, oh, here is like how you work with like your thoughts and accepting them. Get Out of Your Mind and Into Your Life is by Stephen Hayes, who's the founder of acceptance and commitment therapy. That can be really useful. And then Act Made Simple is, again, another resource for that particular therapy. For cognitive behavioral therapy, Mind Over Mood is a really good like intro to cognitive behavioral therapy and really helps people. And there's specific things like the Anxiety and Worry workbook that are based around like anxiety and worry specifically, that is also CBT based, that is really highly ranked. There's plenty of others that I can obviously like add to.
Yeah, we'll put it in the notes. Absolutely. Yeah.
Those are like, you know, in my field, like kind of the books that we recommend to patients who want to learn more about these particular types of therapy.
Also, real quick, I'm going to pass it, and we can bring you on as well, because I know this is really where you and I spoke in private about this, and I really want to get your take and also your resources, and for people to even understand. There's certain modalities that you work with that I think I'd really love to bring light to. The second thing is, and then we'll kind of go into Q&A, and there's so many comments. I haven't really been able to track them. I don't know if Zer, Vaisakh, or any of you have been able to grab them, but if you go into, I think it's like the question icon, you can leave a question as well if you'd like us to respond, or there's something in particular you kind of want to post to the panel, or even a particular member on the panel. And yeah, speaking of which, Zer, if you have any, and we'll bring Weam, if you can join as well, we'll bring you up. But Zer, if you have any, you know, resources, guides, etc., too, that you would recommend.
No, I think Stephanie did a really great job. I think she covered majority of the things. I think she covered more than what I had down, actually.
I'm back. Let's see.
Do you want one of us to leave for a little bit?
That might be, yeah, that's right. We're capped at 4.
let me see.
Oh, Vaisakh left. He's got it.
I was just going to try to see if I could get on with my computer.
Leave a question, or if you already left it in the comments, I'm sorry if we lost it. It's really
No,
hard.
I've been keeping track of them, so sorry. So yeah, so do you want me to say their name? Street Comedy. So I think it's Street Comedy asked, do you guys think that there could be more connection with Isha guides, assuming the olden days these practices were taught with more contact with an actual guru?
Expanding up to 20 plus million people has had its, yeah, I mean, that would be a whole different conversation, but it's definitely had its challenges and its struggles, unfortunately. But are there any questions there that came up? Also, I know this one question that there's two that people submitted, and Weam actually was gonna specifically talk about one of them. But if we can't, she was having technical difficulties, so she might not be able to pose this. And yeah, Stephanie's there if you guys want to direct it. So I'll read what they submitted. I feel stuck. No matter how much I try to come out, just one thought and it pulls me down again. It's a mixture of emotions that stem from emotional attachment, unfulfilled expectations, desires that got crushed, self-pity, regret, and resentment. This is a strong pattern that I find difficult to break.
Yeah, I mean, I think those are the exact things that like some of the therapies that I talked about already do target. Because, and again, I think if you can have a therapist, if that is a feasibility where you live in with insurance and all of the things that go into like whether you can find a therapist or not, having that to help with those can be useful too. But though that feeling of being stuck, of your thoughts having so much power over you, what both cognitive behavioral therapy and acceptance commitment therapy work on they work on that level of the thought, which is I think a powerful way to like really like get that emotion calmed down. It's really hard to work on the level of emotion. I think the way that you do it is by meditating and sitting with, so say an emotion comes up and you're feeling it really, really strongly. Sometimes getting out of your head, sinking into your body and just literally watching, what does the emotion look like in my body? What am I feeling in my chest? What am I feeling in my belly? What am I feeling in like the tightness in my shoulders? And kind of labeling that and using that as both like a mindful like tool, and also using that as a way to get out of that pattern that keeps repeating in the mind over and over again. That can be really powerful, and we often do that with patients. We call it sitting in the suck. Like, so you have,
I've heard that before. Yeah.
What's a suck? Sitting in the?
Sitting in the suck. So this really sucks. And so right now it really sucks. I'm feeling really terrible. And just being able to like sit and accept those feelings can be really powerful on its own. And then when you're not in the strongest like emotional state where you're in an immediate reactivity, that's where working with your thoughts can be really powerful. And again, I think it's hard to really explain the full therapy in the context of this this panel, but like being able to either challenge your thoughts, where is this pattern coming from? Why is it coming up? Is this pattern true? What is the evidence for it? What is the evidence against it? Those kind of realms of like working with your thoughts, or just being like, oh, there that thought is again. That thought comes up a lot. That came from my childhood. That's not a thought that I want to be important to me anymore. And almost like a letting go of that kind of thought pattern that over time, as you let it go again and again, can eventually get better. So there's obviously a lot of like technical details to all of this, but that would be my general recommendation of where you could start.
And just for people to know as well, unfortunately, Weam, I know was having technical difficulties, but she had a number of resources to recommend to people. So her background is as a clinical therapist, for those who are in the very beginning and heard a bit from her before Wi-Fi killed it all. But we will add on the notes document that we will share to people. And if you just joined, at the end of the live, we have an amazing friend, Karishma, who is taking notes for many of the resources and references and guides that we're naming in this talk. And so we will have that as a public document that people can access and use as a starting point to, you know, look at different modalities, look at different, you know, approaches and, you know, potential areas for help. And actually, Stephanie, one thing I wanted to, before we'll close fairly soon, because I'm not sure, this is a heartbreaker, but yeah, I think Jay was having technical difficulties too, so I don't think we'll be able to bring him on. But one thing that we were talking about earlier are kind of addressing and giving voice to the barriers to treatment, right? I mean, this is something that I just really found out in the research, that a desire to handle the problem on one's own and low perceived need, i.e., you know, I don't need professional help and or I can do it by myself, are two of the greatest barriers to getting help. And I know this from also, you know, anecdotally, many of my Isha friends, and to be frank, almost all of my guy friends who have struggles, but haven't yet sought help, or, you know, don't really know, you know, where to go. But yeah, Stephanie, I'd love to kind of throw that to you and Zer too, if you want to address it. Yeah.
So in my culture, so I'm Hmong, and I'm Hmong American, and a lot of people who are Hmong are shamans. Not obviously, there's a lot of people who've converted, but my family is still shaman. And one of the things that happened in my family is that, so mental health, so in my community, mental health doesn't actually exist. Like usually the direct translation is that that person is crazy. But then one thing that does happen is that when you're a shaman, you're kind of selected, and shamans usually kind of undergo like a psychotic break. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things that you do when you kind of go like undergo a psychotic break from being a shaman is that you find another shaman to help lead you, right? And so I feel like that's one thing that you can do is if you can find someone who can help lead you to mm-hmm. like where you, and that's one of the best things that's like one of the best ways to actually like be able to get out of it, right? I don't know how it is for other people, but like for my culture, like that's how it goes. It's like you find someone who is, because you've been kind of chosen as a shaman. I know it doesn't translate very well and it doesn't make sense in probably other cultures, but in my culture, what happens is that you have a psychotic break. And what you do is that you search for someone who, so like, because you have this psychotic break, you're considered a shaman. Mm-hmm. And the person who would help you or show you your way is actually someone else who is also a shaman. And so, and it's really like gives you like kind of like a path to follow and what to do and where to go. But I know that doesn't translate very well at all now that I'm talking about it out loud.
Can I just make a few comments related to that? So there's a lot of cultures, like there's culture where like mental health is really stigmatized against. And while I'm sure there are people that are very much helped by other shamans, there may also be a lot of people that are suffering very intensely and are not getting help. I don't want to bring out things about Zer's family, but she had family members who were clearly suffering from mental health disorders. And I think that stigma within a lot of these societies can also be a big thing that prevents people from getting help. They may make this excuses, oh, I can just handle it by myself. This is what we do in our culture. This is how I was raised. And I think there's a lot of cultures that are like that are, this is just how it is. This is what we do. We keep it within ourselves. We work with it by like maybe one specific person. And I think it's a really hard thing to break out of. And to acknowledge, oh, wait, getting actual psychiatric help could be really, really useful, or psychological. When I say psychiatric help, I'm not talking specifically about medicines. And I think often the desire to handle things on your own, the perceive that you have low perceived need causes people to internalize that psychiatric, like those psychiatric symptoms, and they may manifest as anxiety or other things, but more often they manifest as physical things like diabetes, hypertension, high cholesterol,
autoimmune
disorders. That desire to like not have a mental health disorder because of how stigmatized it is can actually manifest in the body. And so people are like, oh, I just have medical problems. So that's another way to kind of deny that there is stress, that there is like this underlying thing that could need help. You know, I think like what I would say is kind of what I said earlier. Something that is causing functional decline, like is the term we use, that is causing you not to be able to do the things that you want or need to do, is probably serious enough to address in some way. Maybe that is reading a book. Maybe that is downloading an app. Maybe you do those things before you seek therapy, maybe. Or maybe you reach out and try to find a therapist, try to see what it's all about, make a connection, and see if that is something that is useful tool for you. You know, I don't think we have to talk specifically about medications. They may or may not have their place for certain people. Again, there's certain disorders that I think medications can be really helpful with. But I think just like starting to recognize that, hey, I'm not functioning well. And I think the other thing we talked about earlier was the manifestation in substance use disorders of like, oh, I'm totally fine. I can handle this on my own, but I'm actually drinking 4 to 6 drinks every night and using such large amounts of cannabis every day that I'm barely functional. I'm just kind of like a zoned out person. That's often how people respond to this rather than really dealing with it and getting the help that they need.
And to talk about, so yeah, I mean, to be specific, one thing we were talking about are these kind of coping mechanisms, but where you're either trying to numb or hide from, you know, the pain, the trauma, really negative or destructive thoughts that can manifest in some of the many ways that Stephanie kind of mentioned. There's something else I was going to say about this that completely slipped my mind.
I get very excited when I talk like this.
Yeah, but it's, I mean, also we're giving voice to this, and I had it on one of the questions as well, because, oh, thank you, Preeta. You know, I think there are also symptoms that not a lot of us can recognize or point to or understand that this is symptomatic of a larger, you know, issue with my mind or mental health issue that I have and need to address. And one thing, I've had this conversation with many isha people as well. I think one, probably in our day and age, 21st century, 2022, one of the most common, you know, numbing or coping mechanisms are also, you know, we were talking, Stephanie, about that over-reliance on screen time, but specifically, it's rich that we're saying this on Instagram, but specifically social media as well, that people can spend, you know, hours and many hours on end, you know, on these apps. So it's another thing to kind of watch for or use as a sign that it might be time to try something else. You know, it's a great saying that they have in AA, because I learned so much in Al-Anon, you know, went through it because I had a dear family member who struggled with addiction, plenty of friends who've also gone through addiction. And as an aside, because, you know, just in case there are people who are also struggling but feeling, you know, like they're very alone with this, there are some high profile people that names that you would know with isha who are either struggling with it right now or used to themselves. And, you know, only through certain therapeutic treatments were they able to come out of it. So yeah, it's kind of a part of this kind of larger raising awareness component, which is so key.
Yeah.
But Vaisakh, was there anything that you wanted to say about that as well?
Yeah, like I would like to add on to what Steph was saying earlier, like, in certain communities, it's stigmatized. And in India, now it's a bit more, we talk about mental health a lot, but 5-10 years back, that was not the case. These things were not that talked about. So at that time, like when I was going through a breakup, when there were a lot of things happening within me, as men, we do not share our feelings, or we do not talk about it. But women tend to be more open about this, and they have their own support systems in the form of their very close friends. So what I realized that at that time I was struggling, even though I was not vocal about it. A lot of my lady friends, they noticed that I was going through a breakup. So even without me knowing, they made sure that I was with them. They would take me to movies. They would just make sure they were around me. And I realized I did not have any tools with like Kriya Yoga or anything at that time, but I recovered just because they were compassionate enough to include me in their community. They did not even ask me like, was I going through something? They did not even talk about it, because if they knew, maybe if they asked me if something was wrong with me, I would just run away from them, because that was how I was then. So I think as men, it is very essential that we have a lot of good lady friends around us, a community who care for us, even though we do not feel that need for that. That is something that, I would like to add. And one thing which might make me a bit unpopular is, let's say there are a lot of masters in India. There are a lot of different tools other than the ones that Sadhguru is offering, like Brigid was saying. So maybe, let's say if inner engineering or these tools are not working, maybe it's time for you to experiment with some other person. That is also something that might be needed for you.
Explicitly.
Yeah.
That shouldn't be controversial at all.
Yeah.
It's very, and if people are familiar with the Indian Yoga Association, which by the way he helped to start, it's having some difficulties, but yeah, in raising awareness and having a platform for many of the great spiritual masters that are alive today in India, for people to learn from and be able to choose. So yeah, it's not only sadhana, not a one size fits all or cure all, nor is there one teacher, one guru, etc. That is, a one size fit all model for everyone on this earth. Yeah.
I would just like to share 2 more books which I find, like, as a seeker on this path, I would, rather than listen to other people's story, I would like to listen to other seekers who have been on the same path. So when I go through a struggle, it's kind of a little bit okay for me to know that they have also gone through the struggle. That helps me to understand, okay, I can go with it. So when there is no one to talk to, there are just 2 books that I refer to, and I still keep on reading them till today. And one is this book by Yogananda Paramsa's Autobiography of a Yogi. Because even though I read Sadhguru's books, it is coming from a guru, and he is telling like, this is it. So for me, I'm not able to relate with that when I'm struggling. But when I read from this point of book, it talks about him struggling. He's having a guru, but he struggles a lot. He runs away from his guru. So those are things that I can really, really relate with. And I need not tell myself that I'm a bad person just because I am not following Sadhguru right now, or I feel hate towards Sadhguru, why is this not working? So these are things that helps me still ground myself, that these feelings are okay and I can still have it. And one more book is a similar book written by a yogi, Sri M. I don't know.
Yes.
So yeah, it's a beautiful book. So these are the books that I keep on going back to. I just simply open a random page and just read it before I sleep, so that I can understand. It's okay, Vaisakh. It's okay. One day at a time. You just go ahead. Just do what you can, and that's fine. So if any of the audience wants to, the resource, these are the only resources that I go to. But today I think I got a lot more resources which I can, refer to when I'm personally going through some things.
Yeah, so the one book that I do recommend is the one I'm currently reading, and then I'm almost done with it, is Breath by James Nestor. And so he's actually a journalist, and he goes and he looks for for all the things that have done research on the breath. And it's not just like pranayama or like Tibetan like breathing tumo or so. It's like basically like all research from the Western world, and not really on the Eastern world, but then a lot from the Western world, where they've done research and they show that like doing breath work actually really helped with like things like autoimmune diseases, and so multiple things. And so even if you don't feel like isha yoga is what you really want to do, and you don't want to do sadhanas anymore, I feel like this book is really good because it also covers like the pros and cons of like why you're doing these breath works, what is really happening in the brain when you do breath work, and what is like basically what's causing all the things that's happening to you, right? So like when you're doing like intense breath work for 2-3 hours, like sometimes you have a psychotic break because it feels like your body is dying. And so if you have like this kind of like rebirth, and so like even if you don't want to do like sadhanas anymore, I still feel like there's a lot of breath work out there that you can do, and this book really gives you like kind of like an introduction to that, to kind of like look at what you really want to figure out, what you really want to do. Like for example, if you have like autoimmune diseases, like maybe like the isha yoga isn't what something you should be looking for, right? Like something like Wim Hof would be great for yours. Something else that actually shows like autoimmune defenses is probably best for you. Like one of the things that like I developed during when I got pregnant is because I have a lot of rashes now, and that could actually be like due to like autoimmune disease. And so one of the things I started doing is I started doing like Wim Hof in combination with the isha yoga or like the kriyas, so that like I can be hitting multiple things at once. And I think going through the book will give you kind of like a guide on like why you should do certain breath work versus others. And I think it's a very powerful book. And he's a journalist, so it's very well written, and brings in the literature into from a viewpoint where like normal people could read it, where like he's like summarizing like people's research, like research that, like if a normal person was to read it, they wouldn't understand it. But then he like normalizes it. And the guy is actually, so I looked at a lot of his interviews, and he does a lot of breath work. Like seems like it's an everyday normal thing for him, and he's tried like everything across the board. So it's a great book to check out.
Also, so people know, Stefan, I just saw your message as well. Don't worry about capturing all the titles. We will have, and for those who've just joined, we're going to be collating all of these resources, guides, resources into references into one Google document. Thanks to Krishna, who's doing God's work right now and taking notes for all of us. So we'll have that as a public document that everyone can refer to. Vaisakh, myself, we'll all share it on whatever channels we've got, so it'll be easily accessible to people. And yeah, I think, man, we've been going for over an hour and a half, so I'll wrap it up. And actually, just as a last thing, if there's anything that we haven't covered or a question that wasn't asked that you guys would want to bring up, or we're good.
We're good.
I think we're good. We can always do more panels if people have more like specific questions, or if we want to address something in this area again.
I was just about to say, that's a very good transition. Yeah, we have some amazing people on this panel. There are two, Jay and Weam, that we weren't able to grab on for technical difficulties, but yeah, feel free to reach out if you guys do have more questions, if you want to have another panel, if there's some things that weren't touched on, or you'd want to see more of a deep dive. We have these fantastic people, so they're a resource. They're volunteering their time right now. We all are, to help. And one thing that I would add on as well, I mean, it's a great kind of teaching lesson that I've had from really diving deep into the behavioral sciences. One thing that I would recommend for people when they're looking at, the resources list that we'll share, is to find, one or two small things that you can look into, small steps that you can kind of make that commitment. It might be, okay, this is an amazing book. It really resonates with me. Maybe it speaks to the trauma that I went through, and I could see this as a pathway to help me come out of it, or a therapist that you're able to find. If you make that kind of commitment, particularly if it's a daily habit, and make it really small. One thing that, they talk about sometimes adding it onto a calendar, the commitment that you've made to yourself. One thing that I love to do is put it on a piece of paper that I physically check off every day when I finish it. There's all getting an accountability buddy, getting a friend who also wants to, do a healthy habit or something good for themselves every day, and you guys can hold each other accountable. Sometimes if it's a really hard, maybe it's a habit that you want to let go of, or something, a good one that you want to have, but you really struggle with doing it. One thing they found that's been phenomenally successful for the stubborn ones is to put money on the table. And it works, like, I think they said almost 90% of the time. So just letting you guys know, there's lots of options in terms of adopting these habits. And actually, one final thing that I want to talk about when we're speaking about resources that help with mental health is sometimes we can ignore the fundamentals. And even for myself, when I was at my sickest, I did that as well. And just to kind of review for people who are struggling, what are the key kind of fundamentals to, physical and mental health? So it is, getting adequate sleep every day, getting a certain amount of exercise, which even Sadhguru and other masters have said this can be one of the biggest and most pronounced issues with mental health, that we're not expending the energy that we need to every day. And, there's just this pent up energy that is, affecting our sleep, affecting our mental health, et cetera, et cetera. So one thing that I do actually, in addition to the sadhana, is HIT, high intensity training, which can be literally 12 minutes. But it has been amazing for my sleep. It's, Surya Kriya, Shambhavi, Shunya, the other Kriyas. This isn't really working the body. This is not expending the energy that I need to expend. So I know a lot of meditators who run before they do their sadhana. They'll maybe like a 15 or 20-minute run before they do it. So there's different ways to kind of hit that exercise note. Another is sleeping at normal times. Normal, but ideally would be before 11 o'clock. At the very latest, even before 4:10 is even better. And then, although I'm really pushing that tonight, and then waking up at a normal time. Another that they've had an incredible amount of research behind to show how much of an effect this can have in your mental and physical health is getting early morning sunlight. So within the first hour of waking up, minimum 10 minutes if it's a sunny day, at maximum 20 minutes if it's more cloudy. Without, not sunglasses, nothing to kind of block the light from the retina, but getting that early morning sunlight that can help, reset the body, release melatonin at the normal times it's meant to be released at the night. So these are all really easy hacks that you can put into place to make sure that, you're covering the fundamentals. Because oftentimes when we're struggling, these fundamentals can be the first thing to go, eating healthy food and not just junk food or processed food, which, diet is obviously a big thing, or we stop sleeping, or we stop, looking after the fact that we're getting adequate sleep, or exercise, we stop exercising. I'm guilty of all of these, by the way. That's why I'm guilty of all of them when I was at my sickest. So just as an aside, and again, we'll put this in the notes, but make sure that you're also hitting the fundamentals before you go into some of these kind of other modalities or other therapeutic approaches, or kind of also sadhana, other practices that we're mentioning. Getting the fundamentals covered is pretty key. All right, guys. Well, I'll open this up to you too if there's anything else that you wanted to add before we close the session.
Yeah, I mean, I think everything you just said is the bare essentials. And if you are struggling with that, sometimes CBT or acceptance commitment therapy can actually help you. There's things called behavioral activation, which is about doing those things. So say you're so depressed that you really just can't get out of bed, you can't get out and get that sunlight. Behavioral activation is getting yourself to do that, forcing yourself to do things even though you don't feel like doing them, because you know that those are good for you. And then the behavior of doing those things that are good for you, the exercise, the getting sunlight, the getting sleep, all of those things, then comes back and affects your mood and makes you So really sometimes it is about doing things even when you're really struggling, doing the things that you know work, that Sadhguru and everybody else talks about that they work, and not waiting till you feel like doing them, but doing them, and then you will feel like doing them.
Right, right. Or no, sorry, go ahead, Stephanie.
I had one more thought, but that's okay. I'll let
if it comes up, we'll circle back.
Yeah.
But yeah, Vaisakh, any closing comments, thoughts?
I just want to say thank you, Brigid akka, for doing this. I think there's a lot of value to me and to all the listeners listening, and who in the future will also listen to it. And I hope, even if it touches one person, to take that next step in their journey, even with the practices, something that, for me, it's just always that one person I can reach out to. Or I hope this talk reaches out to that one person. And hopefully, I hope you bring out the person who's taking these notes. I think we would all like to see that person you're talking about.
I will. Okay.
I'll go out then. So thank you for having me, guys. Hope you have a great day. Namaskaram.
Namaskaram.
Yeah. Wait, my one last thought is, if anyone is acutely struggling and they really do need to reach out, please reach out. We are resources to help people. There may be people who are watching this who are really, really intensely struggling. And if you think that we could be helpful, please let us know, and we will try to either help you or help you, guide you towards getting the help that would be best.
100%. And Zer?
I didn't have anything else. I think you guys covered everything that I wanted to say.
Krishma, do you want to join at the last minute before we end? I just sent you an invite. I don't know if you're able to, though. I don't know where you're at. If so, and if not, we will end it. Wait, I'll send you one more invite. Oops. Okay, we'll see how that works. But again, thank you everyone for joining. Those who are listening on the side, this is a bit of a marathon effort, almost 2 hours. And thanks for sticking with us in the beginning too, with the technical difficulties. There's no Instagram experts here except for Vaisakh, who just left. So yeah, we are all learning together. And again, as Stephanie said, we are resources available in whatever way we can be, even if it's, in my respect, it might just be, making certain references or recommendations for places you can go. Oh, Krishman, you can request to join as well. Somehow that's not working. Oh, laptop maybe doesn't, I don't know.
Yeah, I wasn't able to do it on my laptop. That's why I'm on my phone.
Yeah, you have to be on your phone to be able to join. Gotcha.
Okay. All right. Well, yes, we're almost at the 2 hour mark. Thank you everyone for joining us. And again, if there's a second panel that's necessary, you'd like to happen, feel free to reach out to us. And Vaisakh, myself, we will all share these resources, the document that we mentioned. And this was a this was a great little adventure. Zer, Stephanie, Vaisakh, Weam, if you're still there, thank you for agreeing to be on this panel, joining me in this little experiment. And everyone, I guess in the East, good morning. But for us, it's going to be good night. And we will see you for the next time. Okay, if I even know how to end this.